When people ask me about my childhood, I usually find a way to change the subject. It's not that I experienced physical abuse or went hungry, I had food on the table and a roof over my head. But let's just say it wasn't exactly what you'd call a happy family story. My name is May, and at 27, I'm finally ready to tell my story. Not because I'm seeking sympathy, but because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. I still remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a cold October morning when I was 10 years old. The sound of my mother's panicked voice woke me up at 3 a.m. My father was on the phone with the hospital, his voice unusually tense. "The baby's coming too early," he kept saying. My Aunt Claire rushed over to watch me, while my parents sped off to the hospital in the darkness. Hannah was born 2 months premature. From that day forward, our house transformed into something between a hospital ward and a fortress against germs. The familiar scent of Mom's cooking was replaced by the sharp smell of disinfectant. Every surface gleamed with an almost military precision. Hand sanitizer dispensers appeared in every room, and signs about hand washing were posted near every sink. I tried to adapt to this new reality. "May, did you use the sanitizer?" Mom would ask, her eyes narrowing with concern, not for me, but for Hannah. "We can't take any chances. Go wash your hands again." These phrases became the soundtrack of my childhood. At first, I was sent to Grandma's house or Aunt Claire's apartment whenever I showed the slightest sign of illness. "Just until you're better," they'd say. "We have to protect Hannah." I kept a pre-packed bag in my closet, ready for these impromptu exiles. Initially, I tried to see these visits as mini vacations, but after a while, they just felt like banishment. Aunt Claire's place became my second home, though not by choice. She would sit with me during these forced exiles, helping me with homework or teaching me to bake cookies. "You know," she would say, measuring flour with careful precision, "sometimes people get so caught up in protecting someone that they forget to protect everyone else." She never directly criticized my parents, but her gentle observations helped me understand that I wasn't the problem. I threw myself into school, determined to at least make them proud in that way. I joined every club I could, participated in every competition, studied until my eyes burned. Perfect grades became my obsession, not because I loved learning, but because I desperately wanted someone to notice me. One particular memory stands out. I was 12, and I just won first place in the regional science fair. My project on renewable energy had beaten out kids from 20 other schools. I rushed home, trophy in hand, heart pounding with excitement. "Mom. Dad. Look what I won." Mom was in Hannah's room, adjusting the humidifier. She barely glanced at the trophy. "That's nice, honey. Did you use hand sanitizer when you got home?" "Hannah's been a bit congested today." I stood there, trophy growing heavy in my hands, watching as she fussed over Hannah's pillows. Dad walked by, patted my head absently, and joined Mom in worrying about Hannah's slight congestion. My trophy ended up on a shelf in my room, gathering dust, while Hannah's finger paintings covered the refrigerator. The dynamics at school were another layer of complexity in my life. While other kids complained about their siblings being annoying or getting more attention, I couldn't quite explain my situation. How do you tell someone that you're essentially exiled from your own home whenever you show the slightest sign of illness? That your parents treat you like a potential biological weapon? Mrs. Peterson, my high school English teacher, once asked me why I pushed myself so hard. I remember standing in her classroom after school, organizing debate team materials, when she brought it up. "You're already at the top of your class, May. You don't have to do everything." I couldn't tell her the truth, that every achievement was another attempt to make my parents notice me, to make them proud the way they were proud of Hannah for simply existing. Instead, I mumbled something about college applications and changed the subject. The worst part? When Hannah turned 7, she suddenly stopped getting sick. It was like a switch had flipped, and she became this perfectly healthy kid. But nothing changed with Mom and Dad. They'd spent so long protecting her that they didn't know how to stop. And Hannah. She learned pretty quick that she could get anything she wanted by playing the fragile card. I remember one particularly frustrating incident during my junior year of high school. I had been selected to give a speech at a regional academic competition. For weeks, I practiced in front of my mirror, determined to make my parents proud. The morning of the competition, Hannah complained of feeling weird. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling with obviously fake concern. "I just feel really strange. I might need mom and dad to stay home with me." I watched as my parents exchanged worried glances. "May," mom started, "you understand, don't you? Hannah needs us here." I understood perfectly. I understood that once again, Hannah's vague complaints trumped my actual achievements. I went to the competition alone, won first place, and came home to find them watching movies with Hannah, who had miraculously recovered enough to enjoy pizza and ice cream. Looking back now, I can see how these early experiences shaped not just my relationship with my family, but my entire approach to life. I learned to be self-reliant because I had to be. I learned to measure my worth not by my parents' recognition, but by my own standards. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you can be the ones who hurt you the most. This isn't a story about villains and victims. It's a story about how good intentions can go terribly wrong, about how patterns of behavior can become so ingrained that they become invisible to those perpetuating them. My parents weren't deliberately cruel, they were just so focused on protecting Hannah that they couldn't see the damage they were doing to me. College was my escape route. I received a full academic scholarship to State University, complete with a stipend for books and living expenses. While Hannah was still in high school, living at home and demanding the latest electronics and designer clothes, I was building my own life in the dorms, far from the constant reminders of my second-class status in our family. "You're really going to live in the dorms?" Hannah had sneered when I announced my college plans. "Now I can finally turn your room into my gaming setup. I'm thinking 3 monitors, maybe a streaming station." She was 15 then, already mapping out how to claim my space before I'd even left. I started counting down the days until freshman orientation. Mom and Dad helped me move in, of course, but their assistance came with a constant stream of concerns about Hannah. "Are you sure you'll be okay, alone at home?" Mom asked Dad repeatedly. "What if Hannah needs something while I'm at work?" I watched them drive away, feeling a strange mix of liberation and abandonment. That first night in my dorm room, I sat on my bed and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about being sent away for sneezing. The 4 years of college flew by, with me spending every possible moment either in class, at the library, or involved in campus activities. Home became a place I visited occasionally, usually for mandatory family dinners where Hannah held court with tales of her latest high school drama. At 23, armed with my business degree, I landed a job as a manager at Thompson & Company. The salary wasn't great, enough to rent a tiny apartment and buy grocery store sushi, but not much else. Still, having my own space felt like winning the lottery. No more walking on eggshells, no more sanitizer dispensers at every turn. Then one day, scrolling through social media on my lunch break, I saw an ad for an investment course. "Learn to make your money work for you," it promised. Usually, I'd scroll past that kind of thing, but something made me stop. The course wasn't cheap, it would mean eating ramen for a month, but something inside me said this was important. The instructor, Dave, had this way of making complex investment strategies seem obvious. I started small, putting a few $100s into promising tech stocks. Then a few hundred more. I studied market trends like my life depended on it, took advanced courses from top investors, learned about risk management and portfolio diversification. My first big win came from a small AI company nobody was watching. My $500 investment turned into $5,000 in 3 months. Then came the biotech startup that tripled my money. Before I knew it, my side hustle was making more than my day job. Meanwhile, I kept going to those Saturday family dinners. Don't ask me why, maybe habit, maybe some lingering hope that things would change. I'd sit there picking at Mom's overcooked chicken, listening to them go on and on about Hannah's life while my investment portfolio pinged away in my pocket. "May, you're still at Thompson's, right?" Mom would ask occasionally, not really interested in the answer. "Yep, same job," I'd say, and watch their attention drift away before I even finished speaking. It was easier that way. No need to explain that I'd quit 2 years ago, that I was making more money in a day than I used to make in a month. Hannah was the star of every dinner conversation. She'd gotten into Carleton University, one of those schools where the tuition costs more than a house. It's so expensive, Mom would sigh, but her voice was proud. But Hannah deserves the best education. We've taken out loans, of course, but it's worth it for our little girl's future. Hannah would beam, twirling her pasta. My roommate has a Gucci backpack. Everyone there comes from such good families. The undertone was clear, unlike your family, Ruby. Unlike you. One Saturday, I arrived to find Mom in tears over bills. Dad was at the kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, his reading glasses perched on his nose. The property taxes went up again, he muttered. And with Hannah's tuition. I watched them struggle, remembered all the times they'd chosen Hannah over me, and still, they were my parents. That night, I set up an automatic transfer, $2,000 a month to their account. When I told them about it, Mom actually hugged me. It was the first time in years she'd shown me any real affection. Oh, May, this will help so much. I thought maybe things would change after that. Maybe they'd see me differently. But then I overheard them in the kitchen after dinner. We should send some of May's money to Hannah, Mom was saying. At least $500. The poor thing feels so out of place among all those wealthy students. Good idea, Dad agreed. She needs to keep up appearances. Maybe she can finally buy herself that designer bag she's been wanting. I wanted to walk in there and tell them everything, about quitting my job, about my investments, about the fact that I could buy the whole damn designer store if I wanted to. But I didn't. I just stood there, shaking my head, listening to them plan how to spend my money on Hannah's social climbing. By the time I turned 27, I was ready for a change. My investment portfolio had grown beyond my wildest dreams, and I was tired of paying rent. After months of searching, I found the perfect apartment in a secure building with a great view of the city. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, good bones, and enough space to feel like home. Best part? I could buy it outright. No mortgage needed. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room, listening to my footsteps echo off the hardwood floors. This was mine. All mine. No loans, no debt, no strings attached. I'd done this myself, without anyone's help or approval. When Mom called to check in, meaning talk about Hannah, I mentioned I was moving. Did you find a cheaper rental? She asked, distracted. I could hear her shuffling papers on the other end. Just a different place, I said vaguely. Better location. Well, don't spend too much on rent, honey. You know how unstable the job market is for people in your position. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. If she only knew that my position involved managing millions in investments, not pushing papers at Thompson's. At the next family gathering, Aunt Claire asked about my new place. May's renting a new apartment, Mom jumped in before I could answer. But wait till you hear about Hannah's latest accomplishments. She's about to graduate from Carleton University, top of her class. I watched the familiar scene unfold, relatives cooing over Hannah's prospects while shooting me pitying glances. Hannah's going places, Dad announced proudly. Not that we're surprised. She's always been our achiever. Unlike some people who settle for mediocrity, my cousin whispered to his wife, not quite quietly enough. I sipped my wine and thought about the stock trade I'd made that morning that had earned more than his annual salary. But I stayed quiet. Let them think what they wanted. Then came Hannah's graduation party. Mom and Dad went all out, catered food, expensive decorations, the works. I noticed they used my monthly contribution to help pay for it, but whatever. I was used to it by now. I found myself standing by the punch bowl, watching Hannah prance around in her cap and gown like she just won the Nobel Prize. Aunt Claire sidled up next to me, her eyes taking in the elaborate celebration. You know, she said quietly, I remember when you graduated. Top of your class, full scholarship. Yeah, I replied, taking another sip of punch. Mom made sandwiches. Aunt Claire's hand found mine and squeezed it gently. I'm proud of you, May. Whatever you're doing now, I can see you're succeeding. Even if they can't. Before I could respond, Hannah's voice cut through the chatter. Did you hear? I have interviews lined up with all the top firms. She was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by admiring relatives. They're practically fighting over me. I caught Aunt Claire's slight eye roll and had to suppress a smile. We both knew the reality. Hannah's interviews were mostly courtesy calls arranged through Dad's old college connections. 3 months after graduation, Hannah was still unemployed. Those companies that were supposedly fighting over her? Turns out they weren't so impressed with her expensive degree after all. Meanwhile, the loan payments started rolling in. May, Mom called one evening, her voice doing that thing it did when she wanted something. Do you have a minute to talk? I knew what was coming before she even said it. The loan payments for Hannah's education. She paused, probably for dramatic effect. They're really crushing us, honey. And with all our other bills. I hate to ask, but could you possibly? How much do you need? I asked, already knowing I'd regret this. Well, if you could increase your monthly help to $3,000, that would be such a blessing. I thought about all the times they dismissed my achievements, all the times Hannah had mocked my career. But I also thought about my bank account with its comfortable 7 figures that my family knew nothing about. Okay, I said finally. I'll set up the new amount starting next month. Mom's thank you was barely out before she started planning how to spend it. This will help so much with Hannah's loan payments. And maybe we can help her buy some proper interview clothes. That night, as I sat in my new apartment looking out over the city lights, I got a text from Hannah. Thanks for helping with my loans, sis. Must be nice having extra money to throw around. But I guess that's what happens when you settle for a boring corporate job instead of aiming higher like me. I stared at the message for a long time, watching my stock trading app ping with alerts about my latest investments. The irony was almost too much to bear. The following week, I met Aunt Claire for coffee. She was the only one who seemed to notice something was different about me. You've changed, she said, studying my face. You seem lighter somehow. I considered telling her everything, about the investments, the money, the apartment. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I'm just learning to stand on my own, I said instead. She nodded, understanding more than I was saying. Just remember, May. Sometimes the hardest part isn't achieving success, it's deciding what to do with it when you have it. Her words stayed with me, especially during the next family dinner when Hannah announced she'd finally gotten a job, at the same company where Dad had gone to college with the HR director. It's entry level, she complained, pushing her food around her plate. But I guess I have to start somewhere. Unlike some people who are content to stay in the same position forever. She shot me a pointed look. I just smiled and took another bite of Mom's overcooked chicken. Let her think what she wanted. I had long since learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply knowing the truth, while others wallow in their misconceptions. As Thanksgiving approached, I could sense a shift in the family dynamics. The weight of Hannah's student loans and my parents' mounting bills had created a tension that was impossible to ignore. Mom went into her usual hosting frenzy, but this year was different. I don't know what I'm going to do, she moaned over the phone a week before the holiday. I sprained my back getting Hannah's laundry out of the dryer, and I can barely stand up straight. How am I supposed to cook for 20 people? Why don't you let me handle it? I offered. I can have everything catered from that new restaurant downtown. You're such a good daughter, Mom gushed. I caught sight of Hannah in the background of our video call, rolling her eyes dramatically. Mom's praise of me, however slight, was clearly ruining her day. Thanksgiving Day started like any other family gathering. The catered food arrived perfectly on time, and I helped Mom arrange everything while trying to ignore Hannah's running commentary about how store-bought stuffing could never compare to homemade. I brought my laptop along because the markets in Asia would be opening during dinner, and I had a few positions I needed to monitor. I set it up in my old room and left it running while I joined the family. The food was excellent, definitely better than Mom's usual dried-out turkey. As everyone settled in with their plates, Mom couldn't help but mention her back again. I was so worried about how I'd manage the cooking, she said, addressing the whole table of aunts, uncles, and cousins. But May stepped in and arranged for all this lovely catered food. Wasn't that thoughtful? That's really nice of you, May, Aunt Claire smiled at me. It must have been expensive. Oh, it's nothing, I said, trying to deflect the attention. I'm just glad everyone's enjoying it. She's doing well enough at that management job to help us out quite a bit, Mom added proudly, probably the first time she'd bragged about me in years. I noticed Hannah's face darken. She pushed her chair back abruptly and left the room. I thought she was just having one of her usual tantrums, but something felt different this time. She returned moments later, clutching my laptop with a triumphant smirk that made my blood run cold. Let's see just how well May's really doing, she announced to the whole table. Since she's so generous, I bet she won't mind if I show everyone her bank account. Time to prove what a loser she really is. I jumped up from my chair. Hannah, don't. But it was too late. She had already turned the laptop around, my banking app still open from my earlier check. The room went dead silent. Hannah's face drained of color. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her hand started shaking so badly I thought she might drop my laptop. Hannah? Mom asked, concerned. What's wrong? What does it say? Hannah's voice came out as barely a whisper. $4 million. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick of Mom's ancient kitchen clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my cousin's fork clattering onto his plate. There must be some mistake, Aunt Claire said, peering at the screen. May's a manager at Thompson. I haven't worked at Thompson for years, I said quietly, finally letting the truth out. I quit to focus on investing full-time. I studied the markets, took courses, learned everything I could, and I got good at it. Really good. You mean you're rich? Hannah's voice cracked on the last word. I took a deep breath and looked around the table at my family's shocked faces. I've been investing for years now. Started small, learned as I went. Yes, I have $4 million in that account. And no, I wasn't hiding it, you all just never asked. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Mom's scream shattered it like glass. $4 million? She shot up from her chair, her face turning an alarming shade of red. You have $4 million and you've been letting us struggle all this time? I stared at her in disbelief. Struggle? I send you $3,000 every month. You're a millionaire. She was practically hysterical now, her voice reaching pitches I didn't know were possible. Your sister has student loans. We have bills. How could you be so selfish, so greedy? Dad joined in, his face twisted with anger. We raised you better than this, May. To think you've been hoarding money while your own family suffers. I felt something snap inside me. Years of being the second choice, the afterthought, the reliable but unimportant daughter, it all came rushing out. Hoarding money? Are you serious? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where were your savings for Hannah's college? Oh wait, you didn't save anything because you spent it all on her endless demands. But funny thing is, you didn't pay for my college either, remember that? I got a full scholarship while she went to her fancy private university on loans. That's different, Mom snapped. Hannah needed. Hannah needed, Hannah wanted, Hannah. I was standing now too. It's always been about Hannah. Well, guess what? My money is mine. I earned it, every penny. 2,000 is nothing to you, Mom shouted back. You should be sending us at least 10,000 a month. We're your parents. The laugh that burst out of me was almost manic. 10,000? You want 10,000 a month? For what? So you can keep spoiling your precious Hannah? I turned to my sister, who was shrinking back now. You wanted to prove I was a loser? Surprise. The sister you've looked down on for years, the one you mocked for being just a manager, turns out she's the successful one. How does it feel? The relatives sat frozen around the table, forks suspended midway to their mouths, watching the scene unfold like a tennis match from hell. Well, if you're so successful, Mom spat, you can certainly afford to help your family more. It's your duty. My duty. I walked over to Hannah and snatched my laptop from her hands. My duty ended the day you decided Hannah was the only daughter worth caring about. She's the promising one, remember? The one with potential? Well, let her fulfill that potential and help you pay the bills. Aunt Claire tried to intervene. Maybe we should all just calm down. But there was no calming this storm. Mom and Dad were both shouting now, their words overlapping into a hurricane of accusations and demands. Hannah had started crying, her go-to move when things didn't go her way. Without another word, I walked out of my childhood home, the sound of my mother's continued screaming following me all the way to my car. The messages started before I even got home that night. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from Mom, Dad, and Hannah. At first, they were angry demands, then came the guilt trips. I tried responding at first, hoping maybe they'd somehow understand, but it was like talking to a wall. They didn't want to understand, they just wanted access to my bank account. Then Mom took it to social media. Her post was a masterpiece of maternal martyrdom, heartbroken to discover my eldest daughter has become a millionaire while watching her family struggle. She refuses to help her sister with college loans or support her aging parents. Money truly changes people. Please pray for May to remember her family values. The comments poured in. Family friends I hadn't seen in years suddenly had strong opinions about my character. How could she be so heartless? I always knew there was something off about that one. What kind of person abandons their family like this? Mom liked every single comment, adding little crying emojis and "thank you for understanding" responses. My relatives who had witnessed the Thanksgiving meltdown firsthand notably stayed quiet, but their silence didn't help much against the mob of family friends calling me everything from ungrateful to evil. That was the last straw. I opened my banking app and stared at the recurring transfer to my parents, $3,000 monthly, which they dismissed as pocket change. With one click, I canceled it. I sent Mom one final message: I've canceled the monthly transfers. I'm done being your ATM, don't contact me again. They didn't take the hint. The calls increased, now coming at all hours. Hannah tried using different numbers when I blocked hers. Dad left long rambling voicemails about family duty. Mom's social media campaign kicked into high gear. I blocked them all with phone numbers, email addresses, social media accounts. But I knew they wouldn't stop there. James, I called down to my building's concierge. I need to add some names to the do not admit list. I gave him their names and descriptions, even showed him pictures. He nodded understanding, making careful notes. Sure enough, the very next day, James called up to let me know my parents and Hannah had tried to force their way in. They'd caused quite a scene in the lobby, threatening to call the police. It was time to take more decisive action. I spent the evening gathering evidence, screenshots of Mom's social media posts, recordings of threatening voicemails, security footage from my building's lobby. Then I made some calls. First, I contacted the HR department at Hannah's company anonymously, providing evidence of how she'd secured her position through Dad's connection. Within days, an internal investigation was launched. Next, I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter to my parents regarding their harassment and defamation. Mom's social media crusade came to an abrupt halt. The final blow came when their bank contacted them about irregularities in their loan applications. Turns out, they'd been less than truthful about their income and assets when applying for Hannah's student loans. I watched from a distance as their carefully constructed world began to crumble. Hannah lost her job. Mom's social media following turned against her when the truth about their financial manipulations came to light. Dad's business contacts started distancing themselves. But I wasn't just focused on revenge. I was building something new. I started an anonymous online community for people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. We shared stories, offered support, and helped each other heal. I moved to a new city, bought a beautiful house in a gated community, and started fresh. I hired a team to manage my investments and began mentoring young women in financial literacy. Aunt Claire was the only one I kept in touch with. She visited me in my new home, looking around with pride. "You've built something remarkable here, May," she said, sitting in my sunny kitchen. "Not just the money or the house, you've built a life on your own terms." "I couldn't have done it without your support," I told her. "You were the only one who ever really saw me." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "Sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into." 1 year after the Thanksgiving incident, I received a thick envelope from Hannah. Inside was a letter full of accusations and demands, along with newspaper clippings about successful people's obligations to their families. I didn't bother reading past the first paragraph. Instead, I logged into my investment account and made a substantial donation to a nonprofit supporting first-generation college students. Then I went to meet my mentorship group, young women learning to take control of their financial futures. Looking out at their eager faces, I realized something profound. The greatest revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to help others avoid the paths you were forced to walk. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do for yourself is walk away, even from family. The hardest part isn't achieving success, it's learning that you don't owe that success to people who never supported your journey. I'm sharing this story not because I want sympathy, but because I want others to know they're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by your family's recognition, and sometimes the best family is the one you build for yourself. As for me, I'm thriving. My investment portfolio continues to grow, my mentorship program is expanding, and I'm finally living life on my own terms. The view from my new home office is spectacular, but the best view of all is the one in the mirror. I finally see someone who knows her worth. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply walking away from those who never learned to love you properly in the first place.